Hi there, Dr. Jill White here, licensed pharmacist, certified personal trainer, and peptide specialist, and your instructor for this course. Welcome to lesson 1. If you have joined me for any of the other courses already, I will just preface with saying that these particular lessons may be a little bit longer in time than some of the other courses that we have been through together. I have a lot to say. I'm very passionate about GLP-1 receptor agonists. And so feel free to stop, pause, come back to these lessons as needed. And before I continue, I want to level set us all and make sure that we are all on the same page as far as what this alphabet soup means that is on your screen right now. Because to be knowledgeable, to be taken as credible, we have to understand what the acronyms stand for. And they really just need to roll off your tongue, just like I'm about to say them to you now. So definitely study this part. So the GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1. You may be familiar with that one. It's a little bit more known, I think, at this point. But the reason, and I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people, if I know the meaning behind something, it really helps me to like concrete it and remember it. So I'm going to tell you a little story, short story. So the GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, the precursor to it, our natural endogenous precursor, when scientists were studying this, looked a lot like the precursor to glucagon. They have nothing to do with each other. They don't have the same actions in our bodies, but the actual molecules themselves looked similar. So because of that, when they named this particular peptide, this particular hormone, they named it glucagon-like. So it was glucagon-like peptide 1. That's how it got its name. Now, as far as GIP, that stands for gastric inhibitory peptide. When we talk about the mechanism here in a few slides, that will be understandable why it's gastric inhibitory peptide. You can probably already take a little bit of a guess. And then lastly, I have referenced it already, but the RA stands for receptor agonist. So these peptides literally turn on or activate the receptors. That's what agonist means. It turns on the receptor that our natural GLP-1 and GIP peptides do within our bodies. Okay, so with that, here are our learning objectives for this particular lesson. We're going to be just breaking down both of them, the GLP-1, the dual agonist GLP-1 GIP combo, looking at those peptides specifically, the classification of them. We're going to understand the mechanisms, how they differ from each other, and then knowing how they differ from each other, understanding what the best client avatar is. Who is best for a GLP-1 receptor agonist alone versus who is best suited for a GLP-1 GIP receptor agonist. So also in this course, we won't be talking about the third generation triple agonist. We will only spend time on the GLP-1 and the GLP-1 GIP combo. That is because once that third gen is clinically trialed, approved, available, we'll come back to it. But for now, I want to stay focused on the ones that we can use right now to make a difference in our clients' lives. So when you hear me talk about the GLP-1 peptide, I will be referring to semaglutide. That will be the GLP-1 peptide that I am discussing. Similarly, when you hear me talk about the GLP-1/GIP dual agonist peptide, I will be speaking of tirzepatide. You can see both of, or all four of the trade names for both of the peptides here on your screen, but we're just speaking of the active ingredient, the generic semaglutide or tirzepatide. So here's the mechanism of action for this is just the GLP-1. So when we're talking about anything that has the GLP-1 receptor agonist, which is going to be both semaglutide and tirzepatide, they both do these things. And I will also mention here that we have learned that we have GLP-1 receptors throughout the body. We have GLP-1 receptors in the brain, of course, the stomach, in the kidney, in the liver, right, all over. And so more and more science is coming out with the health promoting benefits of GLP-1 receptor agonist therapy. However, right now we are talking about weight loss because they're not approved for other indications at this time, even though they're being studied for addictions, renal kidney protection, all different things. We'll stay focused on the weight loss use of the peptides. So with that, the GLP-1 receptor agonists, they stimulate insulin secretion. Not only do they stimulate insulin secretion, they're going to help inhibit glucagon release from the liver, and that would be in response to meals. So even when people eat, our bodies are better able to utilize the glucose from the meal. In addition, they slow gastric emptying. So they keep food in the stomach longer. They just slow down that transit time through our GI system, and that's going to help to prolong the feeling of fullness. Not only do we prolong the feeling of fullness by actually physically keeping food longer in the GI tract, but we can also see that there are signals sent to the brain, specifically to the satiety center of the brain, telling our brain that it is full. And so there's like a couple of different ways already that we kind of get those feelings of fullness longer by using a GLP-1 receptor. And like I mentioned earlier, there are receptors in the brain. And so that's how, by when we utilize the peptide, how messages are going to the brain. It's also why it's being studied in addiction, as I mentioned, and other things as well. And then lastly, we're going to talk about for the GLP-1 mechanism is that it creates a sustained feeling of satisfaction with smaller food portions. So instead of needing to eat a lot to feel satisfied and to feel full, you get that feeling of satisfaction. And for people who have food addiction or struggle with overeating, that's actually a really important feeling to be able to trigger. And it's not on the slide specifically, and it's really kind of anecdotal. And but I've also seen it where food that used to, I guess, taste good, really taste good, be something someone craves, for a lack of a better way of putting it, when they eat it while taking a GLP-1 receptor agonist, it's not quite as satisfying. They don't enjoy it quite as much, helping to also keep people from overeating some of those foods that maybe they couldn't say no to before. Now, when we look at the dual agonist, so a GLP-1 GIP receptor agonist is going to do all the things we just discussed because it is still a GLP-1 receptor agonist, in addition to these particular mechanisms as well. So it's going to, GIP is going to enhance lipid oxidation and a reduction in fat mass, particularly in the midsection, in that visceral fat around the organs. Is the unhealthiest place where fat can store. It's going to even pronounce the gastric emptying to be even slower. It's going to make it leave our system even slower, which is the GIP, the gastric inhibitory peptide name of it. It inhibits that gastric emptying even more. And then lastly, it's going to improve insulin sensitivity. So we have the increased insulin secretion from the GLP-1 action, and now with the partnering that with the GIP action, we're going to improve insulin sensitivity throughout the body and all of our cells to help that uptake of glucose after a meal. And so that's why when we look at who is the best candidate for the two different peptides, keep this one in mind, just having that improved insulin sensitivity. So the functional outcomes of utilizing the peptides, we're going to have improved glucose handling and energy utilization throughout the day, which I kind of was just mentioning. We'll have reduced hunger, increased satiety, diminished cravings for problematic food. That kind of goes back to the point where I was speaking of favorite foods don't really taste as good. You don't get that same pleasure out of a food that maybe you got a lot of pleasure out of prior to. There'll be more efficient glucose uptake in the cells with less insulin required because, especially with that GLP-1 GIP combo, you're going to have the increased insulin sensitivity throughout the body as well. And then lastly, again, with the combo, it's going to help to support the lean slash fat mass balance because of that lipid peroxidation or lipid oxidation and use of breaking down the visceral fat. There are studies also that indicate that you preserve muscle mass with the GLP-1 GIP combo more than the GLP-1 itself because it is more anabolic, where a GLP-1 itself is a little bit more catabolic primarily. So what does a candidate look like who would be, right now we'll start with the GLP-1 itself. So semaglutide, as I mentioned, is really the one we're speaking of. So typically you're looking at adults between 30 and 65 years old. Even older is fine as well. They may have struggled with traditional diet and exercise. Maybe they think they're doing all the right things, eating the same, right, exercising and not getting the results. But they know they want to put in the work. That's the biggest key to remember, that yes, people will lose weight just because of all of those mechanisms, the decrease in hunger, the increase in satiety. People will lose weight. However, we have to make sure when we're looking for candidates that they want to do it the right way. They want to eat enough protein. They want to exercise. We'll talk about all of those things in lesson 4 when we talk about lifestyle support. But when you're looking for a candidate, you have to look for those candidates who are willing to do those things. Um, and so maybe they don't have any, these particular candidates for just the GLP-1 peptide, maybe they don't have any blood glucose issues yet. They don't really have any other metabolic concerns. They just are seeking metabolic support and weight management. Those are great candidates for the GLP-1s themselves. Now, to compare that to someone who might be a great candidate for the GLP-1/GIP combo, the dual agonist, tirzepatide, these people might be a little bit older. You can see the age range, we've shifted it up, as they have more established metabolic concerns. Not that they are type 2 diabetes, because we aren't diagnosing any diseases, we're not treating any diseases, we are assisting with the metabolism, with weight management, and losing body fat. However, perhaps when they're getting their blood work done on a yearly basis, they've just noticed their blood glucose creeping up a little higher, even within normal limits, but a little bit higher each year. Perhaps their doctors even talk to them about prediabetes or different things. Those people who have more concern with blood glucose or blood sugar control definitely would be more of a GLP-1 GIP peptide candidate. Perhaps they're just wanting stronger appetite regulation. They really, really struggle with not overeating. So these candidates maybe have more weight to lose than just the GLP-1 receptor agonist itself. When you're talking about these particular candidates. Again, like I said, they may have more significant insulin resistance, maybe a higher starting BMI. Those are great candidates for the dual receptor agonist. So some key takeaways from this lesson is that the GLP-1 peptides and the GLP-1/GIP peptide combos work through receptor-mediated mechanisms. We get a turn on of the receptor in our body, and it helps in a natural way to support metabolism, support appetite regulation, and also that handling of blood glucose. Thank you for joining me for lesson 1. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. I will see you in the next lesson.